Hey the berries, hope you're doing well. This is the support tier list and patch notes for 13.3, which is going to be released on Thursday, the 9th of February. It was planned to be for the Wednesday, the 8th, but they delayed it by a day because of the Riot hack delaying a lot of things right now. So the patch will be live on Thursday. But we do have the patch notes a day early for us to look at and evaluate, and I have made a support tier list which has got significant updates. I will say, going into this one, there are a lot of support changes. I'm going to go and do my best here to go through the biggest impactors and try and keep this video down to around about 20 minutes. But it's going to be a long one. So if you only care about the tier list, then maybe skip forward. But there's going to be a lot of information here that you're going to need to know in order to be aware of, particularly the laning phase situation, and the fact that there's going to be a different range of supports being picked a little bit more often, especially from the in the first week, because people will be testing out a lot of stuff as well. The quick rundown here is that like this is wrong as well. So it says here Annie's getting nerfed, but actually she's getting buffed. We will be talking about Annie support potential as well today. Amumu is getting nerfed. Zac is getting nerfed, so that affects the support. Still, there's no like support icon on either of those, but Zac and Amumu have been played as support, so those champions are getting nerfed. And then we have Alistar buffs, Braum buffs, Nautilus buffs, Pyke buffs, Rakan buffs, Thresh buffs. So yeah, we've got a lot of different things going on here. So do try and keep up, and I'll do my best to go through it as best as I can with you guys. So Iridian Soul update is coming in, just so that you know. Lots of different stuff. Okay, so Amumu is getting nerfed, but the nerfs are not as dramatic as I thought they would be. I was expecting them to increase the delay potentially in between like the Q charges. If you don't know, Amumu has 2 Q charges, and there's a slight cooldown in between when you can use the next one. I thought they would increase that. I think that would be a good way to nerf him. But they increased the mana cost of his bandage toss, which will have a little impact as support. It's nothing that crazy, honestly, really. His tantrum is the main one that you're looking at here that is getting nerfed. That the damage, flat damage there, is going down significantly in those early stages, and you're not obviously going to have you'll be maxing E second, so eventually you will catch up. But the early damage from Amumu has gone down a little bit. But the main reason why you're picking Amumu anyway is because of his crowd control. His Q is still really strong. His ulti is still really strong. They haven't touched those, so his core fundamental of his kit, the bit that honestly makes him OP as support, yeah, that's not really getting touched, which I'm kind of surprised at, which maybe indicates that Riot is overall happy that Amumu is playing as support. So yeah, so Amumu actually might be in the support meta for quite some time. Next, we're going to be talking about Annie. Annie changes are kind of interesting. So Annie is getting buffed, even though Riot said she's getting nerfed. So her passive will now be fully charged at spawn. So that means you could start Q. Because one of the things that you would want to do is take W, so you could stack up your stun charge, and then maybe invade with your W. And it was a pretty pain in the butt, because you'd have to do like the first 2 W charges in base, because otherwise you'd run out of mana. So this gives her a really good invade start. So it means you can also start Q. So if you manage to land your Q and they flash away, they're still going to get stunned. So maybe you get some follow up there. So invading as Annie has greatly improved. Now there's some complicated stuff happening to her E. If you don't know, and if you haven't played Annie for a while, you can give allies the shield. It used to be self-cast only. They're increasing the damage on the shield by a significant amount. So the shield strength has gone up from 40 to 60, and the AP ratio has been increased by 20%. Also, the cooldown, the main one here that I want to talk about, is that the cooldown has been reduced significantly again. So gone down from 12 seconds at base, and then 8 seconds later on. So if you've got even some cooldown reduction there, say if you get close to with support stuff around about 30 to 40%, you're going to have your Molten Shield ready every 4 to 5 seconds, which is pretty good. Next, we have the retaliation damage has also gone up. So as you got the base shield, the actual shield itself, strength going up, comparable more to something like getting close to a Janus shield, but without giving the person attack damage, you're giving the person retaliation damage. So whenever anyone hits the shield, they'll take damage. I believe it's going to be only once per... So say if like an enemy AD carry hits the shield twice, they're only going to get hit by it once. So it's only going to be one instance of damage. But the instance of damage is actually going to be pretty high, especially later stages. So if you want to do like an Annie support, you could probably do shield second. You're probably going to want to do something like max Q for harassment and then do max shield. You could maybe do it the other way around, but I'm not sure exactly how that would work. It'd be interesting about something like one thing to quickly note is also it works on basic attacks and spells. So random stuff like, say for example, Sivir becomes meta again. I could see a world where Molten Shield could be a really good counter to Sivir's Ricochet in the lane. So every time she pops a W, she then would get hit with at least one retaliation damage. You'd block it, and then she would take some damage from that. And every time she would do that, if you max shield first, she would end up taking like around about 100 damage every time she did a ricochet. You could maybe do something gimmicky still with like just random like the spells that are just getting thrown out, like Misfortune E, or just taking if you take one tick of random like minute damage, you're gonna get hit by that retaliation damage. So it's really interesting to think about like random stuff like that now that this is now affecting spells. So this is why I'm kind of thinking this could, in some matchups, even like an Ash Volley, because you're going to be blocking the damage. You'll still get slowed, but you'll be retaliating the damage back. So there's any kind of like poke lanes, like Zyra plants as well. The more I'm thinking about it, the more actually there's kind of more and more champions that are in this. The champions that do like the little bit of damage every now and then. Molten Shield E max, not only will you block the damage, but also you'll hit them for a reasonable amount of damage. And yeah, this is going to be something I'm going to be exploring. The interesting thing as well is that Annie's auto attack range is one of the highest in the game, although I'm not a huge fan of the windup for the auto attack. So she can generally auto attack harass relatively fine. She has a stun commit. You probably might want to take like a hex tech flash and have like really good brush control with like oracles and controls in order to like flash forward and then hex tech flash forward and then do like a Tibber stun and things like that. But it's really interesting that this Molten Shield E and what people can come up with it, because the AP ratio there is quite generous as well. That's going up from 20 to 40%. 90 base damage at level 9. It doesn't seem too high, but if you're going to be adding AP ratio of 40% on top of that, you could get that to, reasonably around about 200 damage per retaliation of instance of damage. But I will say though, for the later stages of the game, you're not going to be getting as big of an impact as opposed to the laning phase. So the main reason why you want to look at this is probably primarily due to laning phase shenanigans and how much this retaliation does. I will note, I don't think, I'll have to double check, but I haven't put Annie on my tier list or looked to change her because I don't know how this is going to work. But 13.4, I'll put her somewhere for sure if she's not there. So if you do see Annie on the tier list, just ignore it for this one, okay? Because this is too wild and theoretical to put it into practice, okay? On top of that, Tibber's is getting a buff too. Pretty significant buff as well. So Tibber's health is actually going to be increased with your AP ratio. So Tibber's base health has already gone up by a significant portion. And then also his armor and magic resist are going up with AP cost as well, as your AP increases. That's not going to be as significant, but it will have a minor impact. So and Tibber's is also gaining movement speed. So Tibber's is going to be a little bit of a menace, for sure. So I think for mid, you're going to definitely see more Annie mid being played, but Annie support could actually work now. It's kind of a smart change that they've made it so that basic attacks and spells, that one thing there changes everything. it just changes everything. It's crazy. Anyway, we spent a lot of time talking about Annie there, but off meta pick if he wants to try something in normals. Try Annie and let me know how it goes. Jarvan bust, but nothing too crazy. He used to be able to be played as support for like one patch, but that was it. I don't think there's any other changes here. Okay, we've got Zac, sorry. So the last like kind of non-support change is Zac. Zac's getting a damage nerf quite similar to Amumu. Once again, I feel like they should have probably have nerfed the engage part. So like Amumu Q, for example, Zac's E, the range engage. They were just reducing the damage by a little bit on the E and reducing the damage on the W a little bit. Once again, honestly, I don't think it's like ultra too crazy. I think maybe the W nerf is probably the biggest one, with the AP ratio going down from 4% to 3%. But once again, you're not taking that much AP anyway when you're playing Zac, so it's just like a 1% reduction, and that's about it really. Like nothing too crazy. The main reason why you're taking Zac, honestly, is the engage. The engage is like the most insane thing. I will actually add though that the Radiant Virtue did get nerfed, so taking that on Zac could now be. I will probably try it, but I've got a feeling it's going to be too expensive now at 3.2k. You might want to do an Even Shroud. Is probably your best bet, because he can do a lot of crowd control, especially with his ulti bouncing on different targets. You will be applying that debuff quite a lot. But yeah, this might be too expensive now, so you're probably going to be going into Even Shroud. But I will say that the healing with max health healing from 10 to 15% is significant. They have removed the ability haste from everything. Umbral Glaive is getting nerfed, but only for range champions, or I guess the cooldown's also going from 40 to 50 seconds, so that's nice. Just a general support as well, quality of life. It was pretty annoying that like Graves and stuff were able to clear out wards quite often. If you are going to still take Umbral Glaive on Senna, I think generally you're fine. You're going to be doing like auto Q anyway to kill the ward. It's just going to be like, you're just going to have to use a Q to kill it, which is going to be a little bit annoying at times, but on the whole, it's not really that big of an impact. And Umbral Glaive will no longer kill traps, so that's like a slight buff to like Teemo and Jhin and stuff. Rune's Overheal's getting buffed, so you might notice this more on Marksman's, which does technically then buff supports, because the enchanted supports at least anyway, because generally, you know, more AD carries taking overheal, which means that your heal has more value. So if you overheal a target, it's not as punishing because you're not like wasting mana per heal value. Now the melee support adjustments. So this is where we get into even more deeper territory. So it's a really nice patch. It's been a long time coming that supports have had a change. So, and these supports, well, most of these supports, should I say, did need these buffs. First one being Alistar, definitely needed a buff. So passive heal, been turned into maximum health, and the ally heal is now based off Alistar's max health. So it'd be interesting to see if people opt into the health rune as opposed to armor to get a bit more benefit from ally heal. I'm not fully sure, but I think this overall is a solid buff. This is a buff, particularly in the mid game and late game. This will be healing a significant portion of your team's health, as long as you're keeping up and buying the right kind of like tanky items. Unless you want to do an AP build. Now, AP ratios across the board on Alistar have been buffed. You've got 20% increase on Q, you've got a 20% increase on W, you got a 30% increase on your E. So if you want to play AP Alistar, it will be for the YouTube meme montages. It will be funny when it works. You're going to be trolling like hell when it doesn't work though. Okay. Yeah. Nothing really too else to say about that. They have also reduced the mana cost of his QW combo, and also the trample has been reduced in mana as well. So generally, Alice is going to be able to do like one additional engage overall with a full combo, which is always pretty nice because his mana pool is generally pretty low. So this is going to enable him to do another potential engage. Overall, buffs across the board, buffs on everything apart from his ulti. It's kind of insane how much he's getting buffed. I had him in tier 4 in the previous tier list. Spoiler alert, he's not tier 1, but he's going to be high up for sure. But like, he's not too hard to play. You just need to get used to doing the WQ combo, and that's really all it is. It's just like knowing when to go in. But I mean, even like this AP ratio being buffed, you're still going to have a relic shield early on. You're going to have some AP, so you're going to do a minute more extra damage early on. Whether or not you're going to go full into AP or not, that depends on how meme worthy you're thinking you're going. But let's move on, because there's a lot more supports to talk about. We have Braum. Big buff on his passive. So when you land your Q or an auto attack on an enemy champion, they then get stunned, and then they can't be stunned again for, you know, another bunch of seconds. So they're reducing it down from 1713 to 1611. So that level 6, like power spike, potential engage with your ulti, that's now going from an 8 second to 6 seconds. So you could do, like, if you're able to, in the ideal world, your Q engage, you get the stun down, then you do your ulti, and then you keep chasing up, and then eventually, quite quickly, soon after that, you'll then get your stun back on that same target. So if the fight is lasting like a really long time in that level 6, that's a huge game changer for sure, because a lot of fights do end up happening at level 6 when ultimates are in play. And talking about the Q cooldown base has gone down from 10 to 8, which means Braum is going to have more catch potential. This is a massive change, a massive buff for catching out people if you're playing with champions that can follow up. So the main one is Lucian. Braum used to be a solid combo because of his extra second attack on his passive will count as an auto attack. But this could still do quite well with other champions that have like resets like that. Like, it could work well with like Samira can get a lot of autos off quite quickly. You can do Ezreal potentially, although I wouldn't really necessarily recommend Ezreal Braum, but Ezreal's Q would help apply Braum passive once the debuff is already in place. Misfortune Q auto attack reset. So basically you're looking at a lot of either spells that apply auto hits or resets. So the illusion will still be like number 1, like generally always with Braum. Another huge buff here. Like, this one is probably the biggest buff out of all of them. With the bonus armor and magic resist with Stand By Me, his W, the thing that Emax last anyway, is going up from 10 base to 20 armor and magic resistance. Now you might think, okay, well that's not a big deal, but it bloody is, because that 10 armor early is a good chunk, but 20 armor extra early and magic resist, the amount of damage you're going to be blocking there is actually going to be quite high. If you are against a lethality AD carry, you will be mitigating the lethality now from the enemy AD carry. Lethality, basically the less armor the enemy team has, the more value lethality has. So if you're up against literally anyone AD carry wise that wants to use lethality, that is building lethality, you are going to conk them so hard with just 1 point in your W. It's huge. It's a big one. You just got to utilize the W though, which can be difficult. But yeah, you got your E to block the abilities, and then once that's kind of over, if you chain up before or after the W as well, giving the resistances is huge. It really is a big deal. And if you get to ultra late game, then 40 armor magic resistance isn't going to have necessarily as much of an impact, because people will have Void Staffs and Lord Dominiques, but it's still a huge chunk. But the main one is that 1 point. That 1 point is huge. I would not be surprised if they end up tuning that down to 15. Now, moving on to a champion that I don't think needed as many buffs as this, and I think this is going to cause him to get nerfed at some point. I think these changes are too big, but Nautilus. So Nautilus generally, particularly in pro play, had been a problem. So they nerfed him a lot so that he wasn't as viable. Now he is basically the most reliable, easiest tank support to play. spoiler alert, this guy's tier 1. Like, these changes are too much. So passive damage, so that's when you auto attack and root someone. That's going up from 8 level 1 to 14 and then scales through. Honestly, the damage on this was decent anyway. It's kind of weird that this is even getting buffed at all, but a bit of extra damage on those auto attacks, and also the passive cooldown isn't that long anyway. So, and you can also use this on multiple targets. So generally you'd be hitting, you know, the AD carry and the support with this at some point. And your W can be used as an auto attack reset, by the way. So make sure you're utilizing that. Okay, so we have mana cost going down on his W from 80 to 60, which is huge. Quite similar to the Alistar in terms of his mana cost being reduced. We also have shield strength increased by 10 flat early, which is huge. Probably wouldn't think that it's huge, but percentage-wise, that is a noticeable change with only having 1 point. You will be maxing your Q first and then generally your W second, but this is still a noticeable change in the very early stages of laning phase when you're looking to engage early anyway. You're looking to do those level 2 engages and your W is now blocking an extra 10 damage. E Riptide, they have increased the damage on this, increased the AP damage on this, I think maybe to encourage potentially doing E second, maybe also to encourage Nautilus jungle. Overall, I don't think this is a massive change. That you will be basically level 2 to level 3, you're going to be doing around about an extra 10 damage on your passive, and with this AP change you're probably going to be doing roughly an extra 7 damage. So you've been given an extra 17-ish damage early with your initial engage, and you're going to be blocking 10 damage. And it's not uncommon for Nautilus to end up doing like 2 or 3 engages before you may end up catching someone out, unless your jungle's here. So generally every single engage your damage has been increased by about 15 to 20 flat, which those numbers don't sound high. I know it doesn't sound high, but when you're playing a hard engaged champion, every little tick of damage helps. Like when someone gets away with one last ignite tick, it can literally change a game. So this reduces that by a good chunk in those very early stages of laning phase, which is where honestly Nautilus, I was gonna say where Nautilus is most dangerous, but honestly he's like potentially dangerous at all stages of the game. So him just getting an early like laning phase buff like this, I think is something to keep your eye on, and we might end up seeing a little bit more activity potentially with people maxing E second if they're playing jungle Nautilus. I wouldn't recommend maxing E second though. It will be Q, W, then E. Pyke's getting a little buff here too. Nothing crazy though. His E damage is going up, but overall it's not really that big of a change until you get it. Like max getting an extra 40 damage max is like where the big numbers come in, but you won't see that effect until like level 13. So eventually you'll see the effect of this, but it will take a lot of time. This would be like really good for like mid Pyke if he was able to damage minions with this, but because he can't, it's not really that big of a deal anyway. So overall Pyke not really that affected by it. His win rate will obviously go up ever so slightly, but not that much. Now these Rakan changes are also pretty interesting. So well, all of these, if you've noticed, all of these support changes are primarily to do with laning phase, like most of the changes. And we have another laning phase change here with the Rakan. Just realized this video is already 24 minutes long. I'll try and go through the tier list as quickly as possible. Rakan Q, this is a big change as well. Primarily because if you're playing against like poke lanes and it's a real... Sometimes it's really difficult to find that optimal engage, and if you go in and you kind of mess it up, you still can retreat back with your E, but you're going to be like low on health, and your AD carry is still going to get chipped away. But they've increased the healing on this a lot. It's really weird how I've just noticed like Riot has been complaining a lot about healing being too high in the game. So they buff Grievous wounds, and then they nerf Enchanter supports healing. but now they've given tanks healing, like actual, like the Rakan and Alistar's healing has now gone up. It's super weird, man. Like, right, these changes are good for the champions, but their whole philosophy on, you know, too much healing, too little healing, too much healing is getting out of hand. But anyway, mana cost reduced a dramatic amount on his Q, so you can spam this more often, especially with the cooldown being reduced. The healing on the base amount going up as well is really good. And on the later stages, the heal is actually going up by a huge amount. You won't really overall notice that. You're going to get an extra 100 healing on your Q if you're at level 18, which, let's be real, you're not going to be level 18 on Rakan. But it is a welcome change in terms of sustaining overall, and does affect him at all stages of the game, but the main time you're going to notice this is during lane. You're still probably only going to want to put 1 point in Q, but this 1 point in Q being able to be spammed more often because of the lower mana cost and healing for a bit more. Don't forget this heal is AoE, so it's like, okay, it's healing for 10 more, but it's going to be for you and your ally, so it's like a plus 20 heal. Okay. Also, this will be more noticeable. The extra health gained per level will be more noticeable on Baron, because the Q, when you prop that on the Baron, that works, so you can heal up your whole team. So getting an extra, like, say for example, an extra 70 healing when you get to like level 14 or whatever, and then you're times in that by 5, an extra 350 healing for your team on Baron, you know, and you better spam that a little bit more often because you have cooldown. So every like 7 seconds you'll be healing your whole team for a good chunk for 700 HP is nothing to scoff at. AP ratio went up on his W by 10%. Flat damage not going up though, isn't great, and the base damage going down per level if you notice. So base is fine, but then per level it's going down -5. It's a bit weird. I think overall his damage is going to be basically the same. It's mainly for, like, I think if they want people to maybe make AP mid Rakan thing a potential thing again, but I don't see that happening. So expect this is nothing, but the Q heal is definitely the main thing you should be looking at when playing Rakan support. We're not done yet. How many more champions have we got? Okay, we've just got Thresh, and then we got a slight system rework that we need to briefly talk about. Thresh. Okay, so Thresh is a controversial one. Thresh, generally in the lower ELOs, such as unranked to gold, is really difficult to play. Mainly because people don't click his lantern, which means people aren't utilizing his full kit. Plus, he's a difficult champion to play, meaning that he is only for generally good, very high mechanical skill players. And no offense, they're not really found in bronze. So generally it's easy to play something like Nautilus. Nautilus is a much easier engage to play, especially with his Q, hitbox, the hook being much more generous. So Thresh has the hardest hook to land in the game, but he has definitely the best overall utility out of the Blitzcrank and the Nautilus. So he can potentially be broken in the high ELOs, such as maybe like high plat into challenger, basically. But these changes kind of make it so that if you do have the mechanics to want to make Thresh work, you can pull it off. So they've increased the damage on his Q, which you would be maxing anyway. Maxing on the max level has gone up by 20. So you're going to be getting slight damage, +5 per level, but a plus 30% AP ratio on his Q. Now, you know, you might be thinking, okay, Alistar had an AP ratio, you know, that was okay, but this is more insane because Thresh's passive gives him ability power and armor. So every soul that he's going to be picking up will increase his Q damage more now by 0.3. I would not also be surprised if people start trying AP Thresh because of this insane AP ratio as well. This is very high. Like, if you actually do okay in a game, it's not that hard to get like 300 to 400 AP. So with the souls combined, I'm not even joking, this hook could actually do pre-resistances, not taking in account to resistances, around about 800 to 900 damage. It wouldn't be that difficult to obtain with a hook. Yep. 800 to 900 damage. I don't know how I feel about that. Thresh's other AP ratio has been increased as well. He will be very squishy if he does that. He will not be able to press Q again to engage. It will literally just be for the memes or doing Q. Plus, his ulti has, I think, a 1.0 AP ratio. So he can actually do... He's going to be a glass cannon AP potential. There is a potential for that to work. It would be memey. I will do it for the memes at some point, for sure. But it will mean that you're not a tank. It will be a glass cannon AP kind of meming stuff. But even if you don't buy AP items, you're still actually going to be doing a solid amount of damage. You're still going to end up reaching around about 400-ish damage on your Q. And don't forget, if you land your Q, the Q cooldown goes down, and it's not uncommon to get a few Qs off in the fight. So if you land all your hooks in a proper 5v5 mid to late game team fight, your Q alone will probably do around about 1000 damage if you go tank. So just let that sink in for a little bit. They have nerfed his W. They've reduced the amount of shield that per soul gives, because they're buffing his damage. So they will make him a little bit squishy because of that, I think. So if you didn't know, Lantern also gained extra shield depending on how many souls you got. So that's getting cut by 25%. That will be slightly noticeable for sure. His Flay. It's not in the tooltip properly, but from the description saying this will result in a 0.6 damage per soul. I believe this is going from 40% to 68% AP ratio. So once again, Thresh's Flay damage is passively going up much higher throughout the game. You won't notice this too much early. In the early stages of the game, you're not really going to notice these changes. Yes, the death sentence is going up +5 damage per point, so probably overall in the laning phase, the Q overall will probably be going up around about +15 damage than normal if you're going tank. You'll probably notice these changes come through much more once you start heading into mid game and the teamfight stages, and that is where, when you've got more souls, basically the more souls you have, the more you'll notice these changes for sure. So the actual soul value in itself on Thresh has gone much higher. So if you end up playing against like double poke and you can't pick up your souls, that's going to hurt so much more. But if you're playing up against potentially one of these other tanks that are getting buffed, like the Rakan, you can flay away his engage. Nautilus is a bit more tricky. It's kind of a Thresh counter, so you're going to probably struggle in that matchup. But Braum you can handle a little bit more as well, because if your AD carry gets caught out, you can throw a lantern. Whether or not they click on it or not is a different thing, but that will... generally, Thresh should do okay in this matchup. Alistar, you can flay away his engage. So Thresh, in terms of the other champions getting buffed, Thresh actually, in this patch, stands out against the champions that are probably more likely to be played and tested. But the problem is the person playing Thresh. That is going to be the main issue, and his teammates clicking the lantern. Those are the two main issues, because Thresh is not an easy champion to play, and teammates clicking on lantern is a complete coin flip. So those are the reasons why Thresh in solo queue gets put down a little bit. But I can definitely see Thresh in the world. I don't watch esports, but in Thresh, in terms of very high level competitive gameplay, Thresh will probably be more of a contested pick. Probably. So yeah. Whew. That was a 34 minutes of talking about individual champions and buffs and stuff. There's a lot to go through, as I was warning you. And we will make the tier list as quick as possible. There's one thing that you need to be aware of. Tenacity is getting nerfed overall. So those tank supports are getting buffed, but they also received a minor nerf in the fact that Tenacity, if they're in the same group, they will stack multiplicatively with each other, and then it's like if they're not from the same group, then they will stack additively, which basically all you need to know is is that Tenacity generally has got a slight nerf. So Tenacity has slightly less value. That's generally all you really need to know without me going into the math of it. Okay. I believe that is everything in terms of the buffs and everything. Let me just double check. Oh no, there's skins. Okay, right. Whew, tier list time. The bit that you've been all waiting for when you were clicking on this video, I'm sure. Let's have a look, shall we? Once again, I'll try and go through this as quickly as possible and identify what has changed if you have been watching the previous tier lists. Nothing has changed in tier 5. Yuumi is still dead. Tier 4, we've moved Heimerdinger down from tier 3 to tier 4. He's getting no play rate right now after his nerfs, and his nerfs were significant. Pyke is still tier 4. Don't forget this tier list is designated for unranked to like mid to high plat. If you're anywhere in between that, which is more than likely, that will hit 95% of the player base. Pyke will still be too difficult to play, honestly, if you're in those lower elo stages. His E buff is great, but it's not going to affect him overall too much. Now, moving into tier 3, Braum has moved up. Thresh has moved up. Those are the two ones. Thresh, tier 3 from tier 4, I think is significant considering what we were talking about. His limitations are with his teammates and how hard he is to play individually. So it's a significant movement from not really viable to actually he could be viable now to play if you're really good on Thresh. Let's just say if you one trick Thresh, he's gone from tier 3 to tier 2. Okay, but apart from that, he is going to be a solid option if you wish to gamble on your teammates clicking the lantern. Braum moving up to tier 3, there is still that AD carry reliance. So I don't like these champions like Lulu, for example. I think Lulu as a champion is okay, but because of her kit is over relying still a lot on the AD carry in particular following up, like when you buff them, that they do stuff. The same applies to Braum. I think Braum is stronger for sure, and you can still protect your AD carry quite similar to Janna in a lot of aspects. Not as well as Janna, but he's definitely the best protector tank there is, without having to rely on people clicking lantern. You can do that physically yourself. The problem is his main power is his stun. His stun passive is quite powerful, but communicating with your AD carry, getting that link up to stun a target still, unless they're already coming at you, is really difficult. So being aggressive on Braum is where I think he's actually strongest, but pulling that off is very difficult. So that's why he's tier 3. Moving up to tier 2, we've had a few changes. We've had Zac move down from tier 1 to tier 2. I believe the damage will knock him off a little bit for sure. I still think he's going to be a solid pick. Okay, Nami's nerfs impacted her a bit, but I still think she is still a very solid pick in solo queue. We'll try and only talk about the champions that got changed. So Rakan I've moved up and Alistar I've moved up. I believe Alistar was tier 4. So dramatic move up from tier 4 to tier 2. So Alistar overall isn't that difficult to play. It will take you a couple of games to learn to do the headbutt into pulverize combo. Once you've got that nailed down, he's a pretty easy champion to learn to engage. It's more about knowing when to engage, because once you kind of commit, it's kind of hard to get out. Yes, you'll have your ultimate, but you'll be like trying to walk away. It's very awkward when you engage badly as an Alistar. But he's definitely stronger. Rakan, we talked about it, his laning phase is definitely stronger now. His engage is forgiving because you can E back to an ally. So it's like the Alistar, but a bit more forgiving. But I would say Alistar is bulkier. With his ultimate, he can stay in and potentially do more things and just be annoying with his trample and stuff. Rakan is more about zipping in and zipping out. And then you're going to be throwing out a couple of Qs to maybe try and heal up a couple of people. And then zipping in and zipping out. Whereas Alistar is like full in, tank, pop ulti, be annoying, stun a couple of people, maybe your pulverize will come off cooldown again, you get to do another interrupt, etc. Like, you're not really moving out of that situation. We'll say though, Alistar, in terms of roaming around and engaging, and like moving to mid, moving your jungler, is more powerful on the roaming side of things than Rakan. Rakan's still good at it, but Alistar's QW is much harder to maneuver out of. And also Alistar gives you more options, because if you manage to get behind the enemy mid laner and just headbutt them into your team rather than doing a straight WQ, because if you do that straight WQ, headbutt but pulverize, you're going to be like kind of knocking them up on the same spot where they're standing. Whereas if you delay it, if you W them closer towards your ally's tower, and then do the pulverize a little bit later, it opens up more positions of the enemy team getting called out. So Alistar is, if you're looking for the roaming champion, Alistar is still going to be better at that. And then moving up to tier 1, a lot actually overall has kind of stayed. So the only real dramatic change is swapping the Zac with a Nautilus. I think Nautilus is, if you're looking to play a tank in unranked to plat, Nautilus is the easiest and probably the strongest overall tank support to play right now. And especially in terms of catching people out and giving yourself an opportunity to get away. Don't forget you can use your hook on a wall to escape. So that gives you an opportunity to engage and potentially disengage. Also, you can do cheeky things like block Blitzcrank hook with it. So if you get hooked by Blitzcrank hook and then you hook yourself to a wall, you can essentially cancel like Blitzcrank's hook, for example. There's a couple of things that you can do that with some champions. So yeah, there's lots of different advanced tools that you can use on Nautilus, whereas in Amumu, for example, he is still going to be very good and very annoying. His Q and his ultimate have not been changed. Sorry if you can hear drilling. But Amumu's main strengths are like go in hard and then not be able to go out, but his engage is just so good in like AoE team fights. The Amumu is still going to be like probably overall best for AoE crowd control, whereas Nautilus is much better at picking off an individual target that needs to be picked off, like a really fed AD carry, for example, or like a really fed mid laner, because his ultimate is a single target, point and click, and it will chase that person forever. And hopefully eventually your team can catch up onto that person that's been knocked up. So Nautilus is very, very good at isolating one really fed target, which is sometimes more important than just doing generic AoE, because say like 3 other people on the team are nothing to care about, but you got like 1 or 2 people to worry about. That can potentially eliminate 50% of the enemy team's damage in one go. Whereas Amumu can potentially eliminate 1 person if he gets a really good catch on it, whereas Nautilus is much more forgiving. Based on like where the enemy is positioned. Oof. And overall best enchanter I think is Sona, if you care about that. This was probably one of, if not the longest tier list videos that I've done for support. I do apologize for going on for such a long time, but there was a lot of different things to cover. As I mentioned, I don't know if I actually put Annie anywhere on this list. Annie's actually in tier 5 there. I think she's definitely going to be stronger than tier 5 now. So play at your own risk, but it is really interesting about the shield changes, so it could end up being around about tier 3. I will test it and let you know for the next tier list. It's just too kind of weird to actually properly place. But I hope this tier list helps you out. Good luck on the climb, and yeah, that was a long one, and I hope you had a cup of tea ready when you were watching this. All the best, and I will be streaming on twitch.tv/Bizzleberry Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday this week. Basically forever, almost forever. Okay, so catch you there. I'll try and climb, and all the best. Bye.